It's the most wonderful time of year. No, not Christmas. It's the 2023 Grid Talk Driver Grades. Welcome to episode number 360 of Grid Talk. Today we're here to give you our grades for the whole of the 2023 Formula One grid. My name is George Howson, and joining me today we have Grid Talk's man in Japan, Louis Edwards.
Hello.
Grid Talk co-host Owain Medford.
Hello.
And the man behind Cricket Chronicle, it's Dev Tyagi.
Hey guys, pleasure to be here.
Great to have you back, Dev. But before we get into this episode, we must first thank our sponsor for the episode, BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting on your favorite casino and card games available to play right now from your phone. Head over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. So this isn't a new thing for us. This is a show that we've done for quite a few years. I think we've done it since at least 2020, maybe even 2019 when we first did the show at the start. Just like the mid-season grades, which if you didn't catch, you can catch it on YouTube and all the socials and everything like that. It's still up on the audio platforms. We basically give every driver on the grid a grade from A+ down to F. And we've asked a number of the Grid Talk guests. I think we've got about a dozen or so people, maybe a few more, who have given their take on how these drivers perform. And we're going to go from the worst to first. We're going to go from the lowest grade to the highest. And unsurprisingly, the first driver is Lance Stroll, who is the only driver in this 21 list that's got an E grade overall, Louis. Yeah, despite some performances that were pretty good at the start of the year and the end of the year, most of this year it was typical Lance Stroll, where, you know, I don't want to be too unkind to the guy, but if you were to select one driver who wouldn't have come back for the next season, it's probably going to be this guy. He's the one who's least deserving of his seat. It's not been a good season for Lance Stroll in 2023.
No, it hasn't. I don't think... I mean, as much as I don't like Lance Stroll, I don't think he was deserving to have the worst grade out of everybody on the grid this season. I definitely think there have been drivers who have had significantly worse seasons than Stroll. So I do think it is a little harsh for him to be put right at the bottom. But hey, it's a consensus. I put him as a C. I certainly wouldn't put him as the same grade as his teammate. But yeah, it's a tricky one because his Stroll season hasn't been good. And as I said on our season review podcast, his best drives this year came when he still had broken hands and toes. So unless we on a Friday start breaking other bones in his body to get him to go faster, it doesn't seem like a sustainable way to go about things. But it's certainly not been a good season for Stroll. He has been completely walked over by his teammate. He has looked second best pretty much in every race, every weekend. Fernando's had the better of him. And it comes down to the same issues that we have seen time and time again. It is poor qualifying form and general inconsistency. And this has been something that's been plaguing him since he started in Formula One. He makes it difficult for himself on a Saturday, which means he has to go on weird strategies, has to go long, has to just fight to the death on a Sunday just to get in the points. And for me, the redeeming factor of his season is that he's been able to do that on a few occasions. There's been a few occasions where he started poorly on a Saturday, qualified badly, and then come Sunday, you know, you see him, he's made up 6-7 places in the race, and he's scrapping for that 10th, 9th place. He's getting those sort of lower points. And not to mention, he has had a few very good performances this season, but it's not enough. And I think that is the matter of fact. It's not enough. It's not consistent enough. It's not good enough. And while I don't personally think he's had such a terrible season that to be the worst driver, you can definitely understand why people have not been happy and have graded him poorly.
Yeah, Stroll's one that's definitely divided opinion amongst our panelists. He's got everything from a U, which I'm going to just classify as an unclassified below the actual F grade. A few people saying F, like Phil, like Gerard, like Aiden. I don't think he's worthy of an F because he's not failed. The only guy that's got an S, I mean, we haven't regraded him because we covered all of his races in the mid-season grades, was Nick De Vries, who I think was deserving of an F because he was sacked from AlphaTauri. Lance Stroll, as bad as he is, bad as he has been at times, he's not been sacked. We know why he's not been sacked. But at the same time as well, on top of that, he has had some good performances. There have been some drives that have been better for him, and that's why he's earned a C grade from yourself, Louis, from Ruby, and also Charlie as well, which I'm sure there's no Canadian bias in that at all. We'll move on. We'll move on to both the Alfa Romeo drivers next, Owain. Valtteri Bottas and Guan Yu Zhou both getting a D grade. Bottas in the mid-season grades did get a C overall. He's fallen to a D. I think it's probably fair for both of them at the end of the day. The car has underperformed, and at times the drivers have underperformed as well for that team.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel that there's a little bit of sort of almost car bias coming in, and it makes them both look worse. But there's a lot to be said for the fact that they're probably one of the more evenly matched of the two, apart from Alpine drivers in the same team across the grid. But they're picking up literally the dregs every single time of the points. And I would say that there have been times this season where it's been possible to pick up better performances, but we've just not seen. A D is, I think, in our scale, basically a bang average. And I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that, it's below average, but it's that they are sitting there, like I say, just breaking into the points. And there have been times, Australia was a chance for them to get a much better result than they did. And they're sitting there on 9th and 11th, for example. That was a massive opportunity to seize a load of points. There's been occasions this year where, you'd expect them to maybe be able to pull something out just based on the sort of random nature of things. Now, I don't know whether they've, just end up on the bad side of that more often than not. But I'll put it this way: I just feel like for Zhou, you can kind of explain it away by saying that he's a relatively new driver. You'd expect that. Valtteri Bottas is honestly, well, he's an ex-Mercedes driver. He should be doing better. He should be able to execute a race in a way that is going to get them to the top of the standings, and it just doesn't look like he's done that. Hungary as well. There's been just occasions where they should have been able to steal some points, and they haven't managed it, and I think that's why they've both got a D at this point.
Yeah, both the drivers and the team Alfa Romeo will be hoping for better next year. But the most notable thing that's happened to them is Bottas's calendar, which was rather revealing, if you know what I'm saying with that one. But yeah, we'll move on to another driver that got a D grade overall, Logan Sargent, Dev. Now, we've been waiting to get an American in Formula One for quite some time. I don't think he's done too badly overall, considering it's his rookie season. Did score points in his home race, one of his home races anyway. How do you rate Logan Sargent in 2023?
I think it wasn't that bad, to be honest, to get a solitary point. If at all, it's just 1 point at the end of 22 races. And I think the biggest highlight of Sargent's career at this point in time is that he got his first ever Formula One points in front of the home crowd, Circuit of the Americas. And it was an interesting finish because I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, Alex Albon was reprimanded with a 5-second grid penalty. But that still did not, time penalty, but that still did not affect his timings. But Logan Sargent actually bringing home 1 point for himself and for the team, and then finishing behind Albon was like a not too terrible P9 and P10 for the team. But I guess I really hope that for Sargent, his best days lie ahead of him. It's just like one season is too short a time frame to pass judgment on a growing career. And I hope his is a growing career. Of course, he's not proven himself to be anywhere close to being the star of qualifying. He ought to have done a lot better than the qualifying results that he got. Because I believe that, it's a great position at the end of the day, which can actually help you boost your results on the main race day on Sunday. So there's so much of work in progress ahead for Logan Sargent, but I'm sure he's going to take the solitary point, which he earned in 2023.
Yeah, I think like Owain said, D is below average, needs improvement, but he gets his contract renewed to next year. He was the last driver to have his contract renewed for 2024, so he'll get another shot in the Williams next year, and it'll be interesting to see how he develops and grows there. Next up, we've got both Haas drivers, Kevin Magnussen getting a D overall, Nico Hulkenberg getting a C. Louis, I think part of this, I mean, Haas is such a difficult one to grade because they've had such incredible pace in qualifying at times, but in the races they've been absolutely nowhere for the most part. However, you have to say that Magnussen in particular was disappointing because he is the more experienced driver in that team. This is Hülkenberg's first full-time drive since 2020, 2021 or something like that. So he's been out of a regular drive for a while and he's resoundingly beat his teammate.
Yeah, I mean, start of the season when we were seeing Nico Hülkenberg keep popping up in Q3 and then Kevin Magnussen sort of drowning in Q1, Q2. It was like, wow, why has Nico Hülkenberg been out for so long? Why hasn't, he been getting drives? We'd seen him in his one-off performances that is having at Racing Point, Aston Martin, and he was doing well, and then he comes back into Formula One, starts great, but unfortunately that kind of faded as the year went on. Haas didn't build a great car. They didn't really upgrade it too much, and I think that's unfortunately unwound a lot of Hülkenberg's early season success. Of course, he was horrifically robbed of a podium in Australia. We should not mention the FIA did a horrific job there, but I don't think that really would have made his season this grandiose. Oh my God, look at Nico Hülkenberg, he's so incredible. I think like you said, it's difficult for Haas because they're just so frustratingly bad at times. Sometimes you just wish, come on, you in 2016, 2017, arguably your toughest seasons, your first 2 seasons in Formula One, you did your best. And as you've become more established as a Formula One team, you've just got worse and worse, and it just never seems to pick up any momentum. It just always seems to just go bad. And unfortunately, I think Kevin Magnussen was the embodiment of that this season for Haas. He just expected a lot more, just didn't get there. Unfortunately, kind of was being out-qualified by Hülkenberg a lot, not really doing much in the race. He did manage to pick that up towards the end of the season, but it wasn't enough. And unfortunately, Haas they were just there. I think that's the easiest way to sum them up. They were there. They did things. End of story.
Yeah, they did things in qualifying, good things. They did bad things during the race, and they are deservedly bottom of the constructors, something that I didn't think we'd be saying so soon after how bad 2021 was. You kind of got the feeling it's never again, we're not going there again, but they're back there. They scored points, but not enough to get 9th place ahead of Alfa Romeo in the end. Next up, we're going to speak about George Russell. He got C grade overall, same as his mid-season grade as well. After beating Lewis Hamilton in the same car last season, we thought, what's Russell going to do here? Is he going to kick on? Is he going to get better? Unfortunately, Owain, I mean, he's a difficult one to think about in some senses because you've got Sir Lewis Hamilton as your teammate in the same car. That is the benchmark that you are being compared against. And unfortunately, this year he's not stacked up. Do you think a C grade is right for him this year?
I think it is. I think it's, just to look at the numbers. I mean, a lot of the way we look at this is by where you are in reference to your teammate. I mean, that's for the vast majority of a lot of these guys. That's how I rated them. Now, I sort of if you take into account 2 things, you take into account that Mercedes is just a second in the constructors with 409 points. And then you take a look at the constructors championship, the drivers championship, and Lewis Hamilton is on 234 points, and George Russell was on 175, which means that of the top 8, which is obviously, that breaks down into the top 4 teams, should be, in theory, he should be either 3rd or 4th. And he's currently sitting with 175 points. He's 60 points off, which is about 3 points a race. He's got significantly fewer podiums than Lewis this year. I think Lewis is, particularly in the mid-season bars, as they sort of start to upgrade the car, he's really kicked on. Whereas Russell, I think, hasn't maybe made that extra step. He hasn't selected that extra gear. Once he's sort of seen that the car can do things if it's in the right window, then he's just that little bit distant because to the rest of the team. I think he's ended up with a C in comparison to his contemporaries up there because he's 30 points off the baseline of about 200 points. So I think that's where he's being dragged down. But hopefully he can carry on from this. But I think that's why he's ended up where he has, where he's sort of he is just the other side of that median, bringing the average down for the team.
Yeah, it didn't end up costing Mercedes second in the Constructors' Championship, but it could have done. Mercedes just holding on by 3 points ahead of Ferrari. But Russell will go again next year. He'll hope to be more experienced in the car and more experienced in general in F1 to try and stack up against Lewis Hamilton. But as we've seen, Lewis Hamilton is rather good, so it's not a very easy thing to go up against him. Next up, we've got Sergio Perez, Dev, a man that, because of his not great performances at times, cost me, of course, in my bet with Tom Horrocks, as people would have seen on the Abu Dhabi review. I'm sure a lot of people got a good laugh out of that. But yeah, he's got C grade overall. Another guy who's divided opinions to people, nobody giving him higher than a C, but there are some Ds and some F grades in there as well, which again, I think Owain was actually a guy who put Sergio Perez again. But yeah, C overall for Sergio Perez, second in the Drivers' Championship, but coming up a bit like Russell to an extent, coming up against the guy who's very good at the other side of the garage in Max Verstappen. Do you think the C grade is about right for Checo this season?
I think any kind of a rating, provided it does not come from Dr. Helmut Marko on Sergio Perez, is a good rating. But I think in a sense, if we were to understand the kind of season that Checo Perez had, then I think the last race of the season would be able to give an idea of just where he is in terms of his career, in terms of his skill set. So there's Verstappen on the top step of the podium at Abu Dhabi, then there's Charles, there's Russell, there's Perez on fourth. So he's sort of a P4, P3 kind of a driver, the way he is at this point in time in his career. Yes, he stood second at the end of the day, and but just look at the deficit to Max Verstappen, 290-point deficit. I mean, the team got 860 points, out of which I think 575 or a crazy number was scored by Max Verstappen. So, I mean, that's just an appalling kind of a difference that he's had to arguably the greatest driver at the moment in Formula One. Okay, not the greatest driver, but the best driver on the grid, the fastest driver on the grid. Call it the machine, call it the consistency of Verstappen. But yes, Perez is just not easy. We have to understand that as well. But for sure, he's made far too many mistakes this season for his own good. And then he would have lied, and that's where he is. But for sure, it takes two to tango. But Perez definitely had whatever contributions he could give to ensure that the Red Bull enjoyed that ascendancy at the end of the day. So definitely, he's the team guy, and for sure, not a single drive of his this year would come closer to the Ministry of Defense drive equivalent at Abu Dhabi, where he helped his teammate, much to Mercedes' chagrin, at Abu Dhabi. But Perez, such a fine guy, so much of skill, such great experience, but the numbers, they don't sort of measure up. But he can't even say that he didn't even have a good car, at his disposal. He had the best car out there. But then I think it's just about the man, the machine, and the consistency at the end of the day, Formula One. So Perez, there are two ways of looking at him this season. Either we blame him, and we have already. But yeah, he did what he could, and he's just exactly who he is at this point in time in Formula One. I don't know if I make sense, but that's all I have to say.
No, I think you're spot on. I think you're absolutely spot on there, Dev. I think, it's a tough one at the end of the day. I mean, there's so many ways you can look at Perez. I mean, this is the first 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship that Red Bull have had in their history. So in that sense, he's the best number 2 they've ever had. Obviously, there is a lot more nuance to that, but that is one way you could look at it. But yeah, it's an interesting one for Perez for sure. And I don't think that anybody has been the subject of as many rants or as many short videos that we've put out online as what Perez has. And if you want to check those out, I've done most of the short videos on our socials. You can head up to @GridTalk UK. We're on TikTok. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook, everywhere there's an @ symbol, Threads, a lot of them. You can find them on there, and you can find them on our YouTube channel as well. And if you're one of the 72% of people who are watching this who aren't subscribed to the channel, please consider us helping us out with a like and a subscribe on there. Most of the episodes are recorded live. This is not one of them. This is a pre-record, but when the season starts up again for 2024, we'll be going out live after each race. But yeah, so let's move on to Alpine next, Louis. And both Alpine drivers, Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly, got a C grade overall. A bit like Alfa Romeo getting a D grade overall. I think a C grade is kind of what you would grade Alpine as a whole this season, I mean, if you've been harsh, you might say a D because they were aiming higher, but given the pace of the car, they ended up pretty much where they wanted to. There were a few bright sparks like the podiums for Gasly and the sprints and stuff like that, but overall a very average season for both the French drivers this season.
I mean, I think if we take the old Top Gear saying, I think it would sum up Alpine perfectly: ambitious but rubbish. They really tried this year, and they were coming into the season saying, we've got a great car, we're going to do great. And ultimately, they didn't. They were pretty bang average most of the season. And, they did have some bright sparks. Gasly got a podium in a race this year. Ocon, of course, got his podium in Monaco, which will be probably his crowning achievement of his, and maybe not quite, his win in Hungary might top it. But a podium in Monaco, I think, is probably still incredibly significant for Esteban Ocon. But it has been a season of internal political mess. Alpine, unfortunately, that then just spewed onto the racing track with a downturn in performance, reliability, penalties, stocking up for Ocon, and it just really is difficult. But I think a C is fair. I think for all the faults of the team that we have seen this year, I think we've seen two fairly resilient drivers really trying to give it their all. They may not have always been happy with each other. Australia springs to mind, then Japan springs to mind, and then Vegas springs to mind immediately. So it's not been a good season for Alpine. But as I was saying, I think it's been two resilient seasons from Gasly and Ocon. I think they're two drivers who are pushing each other. And I think as long as they don't hit each other, get in each other's way, I think that can only be good for the team, for Alpine. It's kind of what they need right now. Two drivers that are going to push each other, trying to get better results, trying to build a better car, because they keep coming back every season like, we're going to be great, and they're not. And at the moment, I think it's these two drivers can push them forward, and I think a C grade is fair. It's average. The lows of the season have definitely been equaled out by the highs, and I think a C is very fair for both Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon.
Yeah, not quite ambitious, but rubbish in my opinion. But ambitious, but average. I think that's the way to kind of look at them. And like you said, yeah, there was quite a few flashpoints for them in terms of the two drivers. But given how he was speaking about them in the season preview, like before the season actually started, I think we were probably expecting some more animosity there, given their history. So I think, considering they've actually been quite well behaved, but by F1 standards, not so much. Next, we're going to speak about the two AlphaTauri drivers that finished the season. Obviously, AlphaTauri having 4 drivers in total this year, but we're going to speak about Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda. Ricciardo getting a C grade, Yuki Tsunoda getting a B grade. And I think, Yuki Tsunoda getting a B grade overall is genuinely impressive, and I think he deserves it, to be honest. I gave him a C overall, but I can see why people are giving him a B. He is a massively improved driver and showing some of the potential that we knew that he had when he first joined F1.
Yeah, he's put in some great performances. That's the thing. He's actually stood out. A few of the rookie mistakes, the schoolboy errors, have seemed to have been taken away, and what you have left is a fairly decent driver. They're sort of the flip side, I would say, to Alfa Romeo, in that, funnily enough, they may have sort of been quite low down in that bottom 4, fighting for every point they can get in a really close fought battle. And I think what they've done is they've actually, what he's done specifically is managed to do what Alfa Romeo couldn't, which is pick up points here and there relatively consistently across the season and in the sprints as well, and done a fairly decent job. I think, by comparison, obviously Daniel Ricciardo not in for the full season. I think funnily enough, he's been plagued by maybe some of the schoolboy errors. Particularly, I would like to point out that it's one of those things. I always thought it was the first thing you got taught in when you started driving a racing car, which is when you're heading into a barrier, take your hands off the wheel because it will snap on you and like that. And I know drivers do and don't. Maybe have got in the bad habit of still holding the wheel as they go into a barrier, but we can see what happens when that doesn't happen. So he was, participated in 8 race weekends and got an average of 0.75 points per race compared to Tsunoda's 0.77 or whatever. I kind of think that Ricciardo's been helped a little bit there by the fact that he was only in for a few races, and by comparison, Tsunoda's done such a good job to he's actually been, well, honestly, he's been the one stable thing about the team. And I think that kind of shows in the driver rating, particularly. Obviously, Lawson's done an astounding job by comparison, but that's a completely different kettle of fish. But yeah, I think that's why they've ended up where they are in the sort of full-time drivers have ended up right where they are.
Yes, Tsunoda, of course, being the only AlphaTauri driver to take part in the whole season. Ricciardo, by comparison, having a relatively small data set. So I think that's why there's such variation there. People grading him all the way from B+ down to kind of a D grade. So it depends on how you see what he did. But yeah, I do agree with you that, I mean, maybe just a bit of rustiness. It was in a practice session. But yeah, he could have potentially prevented the injury that ended up keeping him out for 6 races. But then again, we want to see Liam Lawson. And obviously, I don't think you wouldn't have been thinking about that at the time, but that was something that was very good for his career. And we'll get on to Lawson very soon. Tsunoda, much improved. Ferrari, much improved as well. Both of their drivers, we gave a C grade in our mid-season driver grades, both Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, though, going up to a B overall. And Dev, like I mentioned earlier on, with their battle with Mercedes, only just missing out on second in the constructors. And Charles Leclerc, in qualifying in particular, has been a real positive for Ferrari this year.
Yes, absolutely. Unarguably, rather, the faster of the two Ferrari drivers and the golden boy of the Scuderia, the man who they feel is going to bring glory to Ferrari. And I hope that it actually does pan out for them one day sooner than any later. Charles, fantastic to see him finish on the podium towards the end of the season. The first half of the season was really going for him, and the debacle at Monaco continued. He still has to get his maiden podium at his home track, at his home Grand Prix. But Charles sort of fought back for the Scuderia family. And now with talks being very certain that, he's going to have the longer stint at Scuderia than his teammate Carlos, I wouldn't be at all surprised. And also, interestingly, Charles Leclerc finishing on the exact same number of points as the titan of the sport, Fernando Alonso, 206. And in the process, beating his teammate by 6 crucial points. He would any day take the P5 on the driver's standings, especially given the fact that, as I said, nothing was going his way, truth be told, in the first half of the season. But then picking up 6 podiums at the end of the day, and in a season where he failed to pick up a win. And of course, the greatest moment for him in this year, that spectacular overtake at Vegas on Perez, when it wasn't really expected. But yeah, I mean, he was fast all weekend. He took pole, but I didn't really think that, he would have passed Perez. So when he did, he kind of said so many hearts would have stopped beating once again of the Tifosi. But again, just if he would have had that kind of support from Carlos, who was brilliant in the fact that he became the only driver this year, the only non-Red Bull driver to win a Formula One Grand Prix. If Charles would have had that kind of support from Carlos in the closing stages of the season, there's no question that Scuderia would have been beating the shit out of Mercedes, but that's what it is. And then you take the positives and then you focus for what lies ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Ferrari just missing out on second, the constructors. But you are right to point out they were the only team other than Red Bull to win a Grand Prix this year. Obviously, there was another team that won a race this year, but it was not a Grand Prix. So Ferrari stopping, yeah, of course. Ferrari, which I'm very happy about, of course. But yeah, Ferrari definitely heading into 2024 on a high and hoping to be closer to challenging Red Bull next year. I gave a little mention to Liam Lawson just before, Louis. He got a B grade for his cameo appearance, shall I call it cameo? I mean, he had 5 races, he had quite a few, but definitely impressed. I think he'll be so good to not be on the grid next year, but this will be invaluable experience. And you think, given how good he was against Yuki Tsunoda, and a guy who got a B grade overall from us, that at some point he's going to be back on the F1 grid.
Well, you'd hope so. But this is the Red Bull team, and their dealings with juniors is pretty poor. Because, I mean, we are giving a B grade to, if you take this completely out of context and you look basically just at the results, we're giving a B grade to someone who got 2 points in 5 races. But I think it says so much about Liam Lawson and what he managed to achieve in those 5 races that we gave him a B grade. Despite only getting 1 point to finish. Because he came in on Saturday to take over the AlphaTauri drive after Ricciardo's injury. And quali wasn't good, but then he just he had a good race. He was P13. He stabilized the ship. We were looking at this mess of AlphaTauri. You know, they just got rid of Nick de Vries. Ricciardo had come in. He'd done well, but now he's out. So much carnage and so much chaos. And in comes Liam Lawson, and he just comes in, sits just beautifully within the car. He gets to grips with it very quickly. He's just able to just look comfortable and do a great job. And that is why we've given him the beat. He has come in at such short notice, taking on tracks he's never raced in a Formula One car. And not to mention getting his points in Singapore, which is the toughest race on the F1 calendar. Not only that, out-qualifying. He did out-qualify Max Verstappen in that race. Then he storms through, gets points, and it was a marvellous drive. And I think it says so much about a driver's character if they are able to do that with very little preparation, coming to a new track that is one of the most difficult events on the calendar, and just completely convincing everyone that's like, he must be in that seat. He must be in this sport. The fact that we are having conversations after 5 races, like, why hasn't this guy got a permanent seat in Formula One for next season, speaks volumes about what he did. And while I think it might just about be the best decision to have Ricciardo in Tsunoda, I didn't think it was possibly the optimal choice. I think it's an okay choice for AlphaTauri to keep the same lineup for next season. I would have been very surprised if Liam Lawson's name wasn't coming up in conversations to put him in AlphaTauri for next season. And I do hope he does get his spot in Formula One soon. I don't think Daniel's going to be here for a particularly long time, regardless of how well he does next year. I don't see him lasting, or Yuki for that matter. So I think he definitely has to be that driver who is he's kind of just underneath. All it takes is Ricciardo to go, Yuki to go, and I think he's straight in that seat.
I think, sorry if I may just jump in here, I think Daniel should really head to Hollywood. I'm not joking. Really, he's got that, that rap singer persona. He's popular in America. His home is in California. So definitely, I think, I only support your point. He should go after some time and then make space for other people. Not that Ricciardo is not a great driver. He's a fantastic driver, the master of late braking, whatever.
It's definitely a dilemma for AlphaTauri to get the driver, because if there was, it sounds obvious, I know, but if there was 3 cars, they would put all of them in there. That all 3 of their drivers, they ended up with the end of the season with all 3 of them can make a very, very good case to be in F1 next year. And I think Liam Lawson will be counting himself unlucky to not be there. And I'm sure he'll be back. He really should be. Obviously, if something happens to the second Red Bull seat, or if something happens to either of the guys in the AlphaTauri, he's straight back. He's straight back in there, 100%. So yeah, from one of the most inexperienced drivers this year to one of the most experienced, Sir Lewis Hamilton getting a B grade for us overall. Owain, like we mentioned before, he got 3rd in the drivers' standings. He almost got 2nd. He was battling with Sergio Perez for that. Despite not getting a win this year, which I'm sure he'll not be very happy to realise about, he has been very consistent. He has got the most out of that car after 2022, where he was using kind of funky setups and experimental setups just to try and get the best out of the car. This year, he's absolutely been on it. And like we said, he has really put George Russell in his place, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and I think you say he's in 3rd in the Drivers' Championship. I also want to point out the 2 races that he wasn't classified in. One was due to driver error, and the other one was due to, I think, the team obviously running the car a bit too low. But he should have more points. He should have far more points. Obviously, who's to say what would happen in Qatar? But he was going to finish second in the Americas, and he should be even closer to Perez than he was. So he could have brought that down to the last race. I think he's done an absolutely astounding job. He's got on the podium a lot. He's not one, and he's generally been. I don't think actually in the races he's finished, I don't think he's never finished outside the top 10, which is surprising to say, because in some of the last couple of races, he had awful qualifying performances, and still ended up, as I say, every time he's finished a race, he's picked up points, which is astounding over a 22 race season. And as I said, it could be more. I think that says all I really need to, and it's honestly the mark of a champion. That's the sort of thing that you learn after doing this. Winning a championship 7 times over what is it, 14, 15, 16 years, I want to say. I think that's the kind of performance you get, that even a relatively bad year can still pull out an absolute masterful performance that bested even Ferrari, who won a race and had, and looked to push Red Bull at times. Yeah, it's a remarkable performance. And I think that's why he's got the grade he has. Arguably, he should have higher, I would say. I think, it's just the couple of little, I guess, rookie mistakes that have crept in, particularly Qatar, have sort of just dragged him down a little bit there. But credit to him, he owned up and said, that was my fault. I think that's the mark of how much experience he has and sort of why he's in the position he's in.
Yeah, his reaction to, obviously, disappointment in Qatar was very mature, unlike a certain driver whose reaction was not very mature to disappointment. I think we know who we're talking about there, who was the teammate of the next driver we're talking about, Fernando Alonso. He has been downgraded from an A in the mid-season grade down to a B overall. I think that's kind of reflective of Aston Martin's form as well, Dev. There have been a few mistakes in there this season for the Spanish Samurai, but at the end of the day, he has wiped the floor of his teammate. He has dragged that car up to be the only challenger to Red Bull at the start of the season. He has had some standout performances in there, like you would expect from Alonso. And we always mention his age. He's 42 years old and he's still out there doing that, still one of the quickest guys on the grid. So how do you rate Alonso this season?
Extremely highly. For me, he's got an A+. For me personally, I'm not at all contesting the views of the others who've graded him. But I mean, what else can he do? For sure, he should have been on the top step of the podium on more occasions than he was, and he didn't even win a single Formula One Grand Prix this year, but 8 podiums, 1 fastest lap, P4 on the standings. Next best in that sense only to Sir Lewis Hamilton. Not an awful performance by the oldest man on the sport. And as you guys rightly said about Lance Stroll, who wasn't even a patch on Fernando Alonso, the man from Asturias. Alonso, he can't really put a foot wrong. And even if he made some errors towards the closing stages, I beg your pardon, of the season, and, he didn't really have great results on circuits where, the car didn't really have great cornering speed. But I think Alonso would definitely would feel very happy with his performances, and Aston Martin couldn't really get a better bargain than Fernando Alonso. He definitely is the man who's leading the team in the right direction. And if there is one driver who can actually stun the rest of the grid and perhaps win more races than both Mercedes drivers put together on a good day, then it's Fernando Alonso. Interestingly, I was reading a statistic, and I think towards the end of the next season, he would have against his name 400 Formula One Grand Prix starts. He's sitting on 377, unless I'm very much mistaken right now. So I think that's quite a number if it is 400, and I hope he gets there. The only man who would end up doing so. But Alonso should be very happy. The first 5 races of this season, P3, 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 and P3. So, that was solid. That was rollicking, and that was fireworks from Fernando Alonso. But if you actually look in hindsight, still, his last Formula One victory was a decade back in the day, when there was nobody like Yuki Tsunoda or George Russell or Carlos Sainz or Charles on the grid. So, it's just a case of when can he do it? Can he do it? For sure, there's never a doubt about it. But will he do it next year? Which could actually be, his final year in Formula One. He has this talent of bringing up so many surprises. And as you guys are rightly saying that, we need the Lime Lawsons of the world to, have their seat, have their chance. Because the sport might be driven by all age groups, but its future is determined by the alacrity of youth.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said there, Dev. Alonso proving again that he's a fantastic driver this year. The grades have varied for him massively. You giving him an A+, obviously. There's some A's in there, there's some B's. Surprisingly, there's some C's in there, and I have to call out our wonderful Ruby Price on this one. She's given Alonso a C grade, which...
Who's giving him a C, sorry?
Ruby gave him a C grade, as did Carl as well, and Aaron. But interestingly, Ruby gave Alonso the same grade that she gave to Lance Stroll, which was a C for both, which I don't
Free
know.
world, so I'm not surprised. Good.
We all have opinions here on the Grid Talk podcast, but I cannot explain that one. That's one for Ruby to essentially talk about at some point. I mean, I'm the guy who had to be the forfeit this year. I feel like she needs to do another one after that. But
We can't give her too much. Too much. We can't insult her too much. She's not to defend herself. In fairness, I'm sure there is a reason.
Well, she did explain it to me, but to be honest with you, I think the TLDR of it is that she's not a fan of Alonso for 2007. I don't think she's forgiven him yet for his antics at McLaren against
She's docked him 38. Well, she's docked him 38 points or whatever, one per second or whatever. That he was stationary.
15 years back, Alonso was a 27-year-old young man. So, I mean, each to their own, and I have absolutely nothing against Ruby. She's a gem. But yeah, I mean, Alonso is A, really. He's like his name. If somebody is pulling 8 podiums at that age, I can't see why he's not more.
Let's be honest, the guy's a born winner, and he's done. He's done. Michael Schumacher and Ayrton Senna did exactly the same sort of thing. Let's not pretend that any champion is above it.
Yeah, he's one of these, and the greatest respect to him. I think if the championship was on the line again for him, and he could do something like that, pit stop antics or something like that to win it, he'd do it again because he's a born winner. Some people say it's going over the line, but it's up to the officials to properly punish him if he does something like that. But yeah, I mean, speaking of longevity, one of the guys that we're going to talk about next, I don't even think he was born when Fernando Alonso started his career. We're going to talk about both McLaren drivers next, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, both getting an A grade from us. Piastri upgrading from a B in mid-season to an A, partly I think because of his sprint win, and the pace that he's been showing. I mean, of course, that McLaren, when it's hooked up, is the second best car on the grid this season. No doubt about that whatsoever. But both drivers this season, Louis, I know I'm a McLaren fan, but both of the drivers this season seriously impressed me. And it's really making me feel optimistic for next year.
Yeah, I mean, I could sit here all day and praise both drivers, what they've done this season. I mean, it was the ropiest of rope starts for McLaren this year. Like when it was like back in the grid of Bahrain, I was ahead of the hands going, no, this is good. And then the race came, I was like, oh no, it's even worse. It was just like it just got really bad. But something just switched in McLaren. Their drive to make that car better, and they just did it, and it was so good. And both drivers took full advantage. Sometimes when we see a car get better, it's usually one driver that takes to it. I think Mercedes is a great show of that this season. It was the car got better as the season went on, but only really Lewis, you could see, was getting a lot more out of the car than Russell was. But this McLaren, both drivers were just absolutely getting the most out of it, getting some incredible points and performances. And while Norris was great, as always, from race one, just kept going with that car, kept being very resilient. I think we have to give the biggest plaudits to Oscar Piastri. I don't think at one point during this season, this is his rookie, he has ever looked out of place. We haven't seen the rookie errors. We haven't seen we have to give him time. I don't think anyone has actually said this year, so, we have to give Oscar a bit of time. He still needs to adjust. He has come into that car. He has been incredible. He's been on it. He's comfortable wheel-to-wheel racing. He knows what to do when he's defending or when he's attacking. He always doesn't seem to get intimidated by any better drivers. If it's a Mercedes or a Ferrari or Fernando Alonso behind him or in front of him, it doesn't seem to matter. And then on the radio, he always seems so calm. Right, you got to do this. Oh, well, okay, he'll do it. It's just incredible. And I cannot praise Oscar Piastri enough for what he's done this season. And I cannot wait for what he's going to do in future seasons, because if he keeps going, he is going to be Australia's next world champion. There is no doubt about it. Give him the car, he will do it. And will he, maybe beat Norris to his first proper win? I unfortunately think he might.
I mean, technically, he already has. He already has a win, just not a Grand Prix win. But yeah, it's
Grand Prix win, yeah.
I know all these technicalities and asterisks. It used to be simpler back in my day and stuff like that. But yeah, absolutely fantastic this year from both McLaren drivers to come back from the doldrums at the start of the backmarkers. Basically, they were where Haas and like Alfa Romeo and teams like that ended up this season. That's where they were at the start of this season. It feels like a lifetime ago. Partly because I just wanted to erase it from my memory. But yeah, I mean, unbelievable from the only criticism that it's not even a criticism. The only thing I point out about Piastri is I think the difference between him and Norris right now is that Norris is much better on his tyres and all, throughout the course of the Grand Prix. But that's just experience. That's purely just experience. And like you said, Louis, I think you summed it up perfectly in that at no point this season has Piastri looked like a rookie. At no point have you thought, God, that's an off weekend. Oh, he should have done better there. Oh, why has he done that? He's never looked out of place. He has always looked like he belongs on that grid, and I'm very excited to see his future, as I am with Norris as well, of course. And another guy that I'm interested to see where he ends up in the future, where he goes, is Alex Albon, Owain, another guy that we've rated an A overall. You gave him an A+, as a few guys have as well on the grades. I think it's been fantastic in that Williams, and he's almost single-handedly got them 7th place in the Constructors' Championship. Sargent with just the odd point to his name, his teammate. How good has Albon been this year? And I think with these kind of performances, you think it's only a matter of time before he potentially goes to a bigger team.
It's not almost single-handedly; it is single-handedly. It's you take away that 1 point that Sargent has got, and Williams still gets 7th in the constructors. Albon has, he's had a hell of a career at this point. He's already been through the wars, and he's still quite young. He's obviously started out. I think he started out in Toro Rosso, and then obviously gone up to the race seat, and then got demoted from the race seat. Did a season in DTM in the GT3 cars when they moved over to that. Came back. He's really had a trial by fire, and I think to be honest, all of that experience has come to make him an astounding driver. And I don't know why we ever doubted him. I think he unfortunately got burned by the searing heat of the limelight of being right next to Max Verstappen. But beyond that, you look at it and you go, well, the guys had to deal with the Toro Rosso, then deal with a Max Verstappen designed Red Bull, a Red Bull designed for Max Verstappen, because it would have been, and we all know that. And then, he's had to go away, go and find himself, and, really deal with the sort of troubles of that, and get over the fact that he's he's essentially just been cast aside by the Red Bull machine, and then find his way back to Formula One. And I think maybe his experience in a twitchy car that's maybe not got so much downforce, but more is maybe a little bit difficult to drive at times, has helped him when he's gone to Williams. And he's pulled out some absolute masterful performances. I'd be happy putting him as the most consistent driver on the grid by far, apart from the sort of Lewis Hamilton and things like that. But you got to remember the car's significantly worse, and it's got his strengths, but I think they've maximised it. And I don't know how the maths obviously adds up, but I don't know how he's managed to get 27 points out of it. He's never finished higher than 7th, but he's finished 7th twice. Got a few positions and got a 7th in a sprint. But beyond that, he's managed to extract 27 points out of the season, which is ridiculous to me. And honestly, and like I say, he has single-handedly put them in 7th place in the constructors. I don't know what more he could have done. That's why I've given him an A+. I genuinely think he has had the best season he's ever had, and I'm so excited to see what he does. Hopefully with a resurgent Williams and the lack of comparison to an enigma of a driver. I can only imagine what he's going to go and do in the future, given a better car.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And like you rightfully say, it's a hell of a comeback story for him as well. He was out of Formula One for a little bit because he got beat by Max Verstappen in the same car, as Max Verstappen does a lot to his teammates. Did the same thing to Gasly, doing the same thing to Perez right now as well. There's no disrespect in that in a sense. But yeah, for Albon to drag the performances out of the Williams, which, with the greatest respect to that Williams, it's not a particularly consistent car. It's very good around high-speed tracks, but for the most part, they're probably running it on an absolute knife edge relatively with the setup just to get it as far up the grid and keep it there. And he kept it there. He's done brilliantly. He absolutely deserved his A grade. And the only guy that we've got ahead of him, of course, is the guy we just mentioned there, his former teammate, Max Verstappen, Dev. Just an unbelievable record-breaking season. Of course, people will say, oh, it's a car designed by Red Bull just for him. Of course it is. It's the fastest car on the grid. But right now, the level of dominance that he has shown in this championship this year has been unparalleled. 19 wins, I think he ended up with, something like that. 22 races. You know, he would have won the Constructors' Championship comfortably by himself. If Red Bull just ran one car, they still would have won it. And that for me shows how good he is. And of course, he's the only guy on the grid to get an A+ from us overall. I think it's fully deserved.
I think in lighter vein, Formula One sort of in 2023 became the Max Verstappen Grand Prix season. And I mean, he was just brilliant. He was incredible. The adjectives can run amok, and they deserve to, because he literally left little to the imagination. The only place where he would like to improve, if at all there's something left for it, would be the Singapore Grand Prix, because he didn't do too well in qualifying and he found himself completely outclassed by Ferrari there. But speaking of outclassing, I mean, it was the classiest of seasons. And Max Verstappen, so perennially Formula One bad boy. And I don't at all blame the Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton fans, because Hamilton was robbed of a deserving 8th title. But the same Verstappen who we subjected to not such good grades and not such nice comments 2 years back, today has the respect of so many other people. I'm not saying that the world has become orange because Max Verstappen is in it, but definitely, I mean, he left little to the imagination. He was merciless. He was ruthless. He was consistent. And I think consistency is definitely one of the lesser appreciated virtues in Formula One, because as you rightly said yourself, George, that many times we think that it's the car, and of course, Mr. Adrian Newey and his disciples at Red Bull, they have to be congratulated. They can't be thanked enough, truth be told. Honda can't be thanked enough, truth be told. Verstappen realizes. But you would note that pretty much in every race, after winning the race over the team radio, how thankful he was for his team. And I think that's the mark of a true champion. You know, he's not full of himself. This is what the feeling I got. And he's also often been misjudged. But I think the 2023 Max Verstappen was not just a boy coming onto his own. It was like, the transition of a young man being, the conqueror of sorts. And I mean, Lewis Hamilton, at the end of the day, offering some kind words to Max was actually further confirmation of Max Verstappen's glowing legend. It's a glowing legend. And Christian Horner has pulled all the right tricks in the trade. But here's a question to everybody who follows Formula One, whether he commentates on it, whether he or she writes about it. If Verstappen is allowed to dominate the way he already is, then what is left of the sport? Of course, we have the Piastris and the Lawsons of the world who are doing their bit, who are trying to put out something there for others to follow. But otherwise, Formula One, I really fear, will become another mundane story. No matter how many Drive to Survive you have in the world, you'll have more OTT platforms delivering you more and possibly even more exciting, enchanting documentaries or real-life works of art from the world of Grand Prix racing. But Max Verstappen also has to be stopped. And I think it will be far more interesting than what it already is when Verstappen can actually be tackled properly by Leclerc and Russell, for instance. George, think about it. And if he's actually made to work doubly hard. So I would like to go back to some examples from Spielberg, the home of Red Bull, in the past. So 2019 race, when Leclerc came so close to winning it, but then ultimately it was Max Verstappen's dominance at the end of the day that saved the day for Red Bull. So we need such battles day in, day out, every week. We have to push Max Verstappen. Only then. So there are two sides to it. So Verstappen will not only get schooled, and I think it'll be fun for Formula One, but at the same time, we'll actually get to see Verstappen, how he responds when he's tackled like that. But honestly, the way he conquered qualifying on most Saturdays, and then to come back a few hours later, sit in the same car, buckle up, take to the wheels of that merciless beast called the RB19, and then just smash the opponents. So he was, smash Stappen this year for me. But Formula One would be a more interesting and involved sport when other teams really pulled up their acts. Otherwise, we're just going to see after the Lewis and Mercedes era, with much due respect, the Red Bull and Verstappen era, with much due respect, and then who else? Time for McLaren to really stand up. And they have been improving. We have seen the legend of the last lap, Lando. It's been 3 years since he pulled out that brilliant stuff. I think he overtook Perez at Austria. And here's Norris. He's really coming into his own. And then that brilliant, breathtaking 2021 Russian Grand Prix qualifying drive. I think he took pole. He started from pole. And then the wrong choice of tires. And then you saw Hamilton outclassing him. But we need Piastris and Lando Norrises of the world to step up. We need more wins from Charles and Carlos. Carlos also. It's just a very convenient narrative to win one race and then just to be seen as the ladies' man and chilly and whatever. But yeah, I mean, he's such a brilliant driver. And we need the sport, the rest of the drivers to challenge Max Verstappen. Who knows? Maybe the outcome could be that Verstappen would be defeated easily, or maybe Verstappen will just come out with an even bigger roar. And then, I don't know. I just hope 2024, some sort of a revolution.
Very well put again, Dev. It's so good to have you back on the show for making speeches like that, and I think you're right. I think it would be good for Formula One to have it be more competitive next year, of course, at the top. But it's a discussion for another day. But we've seen these dominant streaks end. Michael Schumacher after 2004, people would have been like, he's just going to win forever with Ferrari, and that ended when Alonso came along. And we were saying the exact same things when Hamilton was winning his championships on this show, and 2021 ended that. And these streaks do end. But currently, right now, Max Verstappen's on the third longest winning streak ever in Formula One, and it's still going, and it's going to take something special next year from the likes of Ferrari or Mercedes or McLaren or whoever to be able to try and stop that, because right now the combination of him, that Red Bull in that team, it's just unbeatable and nothing is close. And like you said, smash Stappen, he has destroyed the competition this season. Like, it's not even close. It's not even close.
It's exactly what happens to you on race day when you don't pull up your act. That's what he's done. And, we can go on and on about why he's not a deserving winner. He'll always have his share of critics. But again, 10 consecutive race wins, and then to put Red Bull back to that era of dominance, which we thought would never come back again once Sebastian Vettel left. I think he's done incredibly, incredibly well. But yeah, I'll stick to what I say. It will be a boring sport again if Verstappen is allowed to take away every single,
Yeah, we want competitive business at the end of the day. But yeah, we were absolutely unanimous in giving him an A+. Everybody gave him an A+ on our grades. The only driver to get anywhere near that. And fully deserving of being there. But yeah, that is the entire grid. That is all 21 drivers that competed in the second half of the 2023 season graded. Yeah, and so I want to give a thank you to my panelists for joining us today. Dev, I mentioned that you are the man behind the Cricket Chronicle. I know you're a man who's invested in a lot of different journalistic publications. Feel free, shout them out. What work do you want people to see?
Well, I mean, if people still like reading, then they can read some of my work on Red Point. It's a small publication, small but growing publication based out of New Delhi with the presence in Mumbai. And we have a small podcast as well. And thank you for having me back here, George. And also, big thanks to Jared Partridge for believing in me, for making me part of Cricket Chronicle. It's absolutely thrilling.
Yep. Great to have you back, Devin. Yes, Jared, of course, the founder of this podcast. This is a fun chronicle, a lot, really. Louis, I gave a mention to some of our socials before. Do you want to remind the listeners where else you can find Grid Talk?
Absolutely. Anywhere that you want to find us, you can find us. And that's the beauty of social media, I guess. Yeah, if you want to find us on X, on Threads, on Instagram, on Facebook, or even on YouTube, is at Grid Talk UK. We've made it very simple for you to find us. It's the same username for every platform. Just go, search for it. You'll find us. And yeah, give us a follow and also subscribe with the notification bell on, which is important for especially when we go live, because you'll know as soon as we go live, and you can get in and leave us live comments, however nice or not nice you want to be.
But please be nice, though. It's better when you're
nice. Please be nice.
But if you really want to be kind, you can head over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. That would be a great way to show us that you do appreciate the show. I really enjoyed recording this with you guys. And yeah, we have a lot more than just these review shows. We've also got race reviews, qualifying reviews, sprint reviews, qualifying analysis. We've got a lot. And Owain as well, we have a sister show, Formula Talk, that covers other series as well.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about the rookies in this driver rating, and if you want to hear about the new rookies that we won't have them next year, unfortunately, but they will be kicking about and they will be making their way in soon. There's a lot of drivers in F2 and F3 that you can hear about on Formula Talk, which is available everywhere that you can get Grid Talk. You can also get Formula Talk.
Yes, and the wonderful Sophia Richmond hosts that show. I've been the guest on there a few times recently as well to review Macau, which was unbelievably insane. That was my first time watching Macau live. That was something special, and to also review the Formula 2 season as well. So yeah, quite a lot going on there too. Yeah, and if you want to support the show financially, you can head over to Patreon as well, where you can help get us better mics, lights, and recording equipment. And also, yeah, we'll be back next week with another show. I believe we're going to be reviewing a classic race. A few of our panelists are going to watch the same race and just go over it. Which race that's going to be, you're going to have to tune in to find out. That'll be Wednesday. Let me just look at my calendar. That'll be live on Wednesday the 20th, so a week after this show goes on the audio and video platforms. But yes, I believe this will be the last time I'm on the show before Christmas. So I want to wish everybody, all of our listeners through this year, a very Merry Christmas and a very nice holiday period this year, however you're spending it with friends or family or whatever. I hope you have a great time. And I will personally see you in the new year. And yeah, thanks for joining us, lads. Really do appreciate it as always.
No worries.
No problem.
Thanks for having me here again. Pleasure to speak to you guys again. You guys are rock stars. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You too, Dev. You too. And yes, we'll be back, like I said, a week today to go over a classic race. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and goodbye.